Hi, welcome to the show. My guest today is Eric Nagler from the Human Awareness Institute, and today's topic we're going to touch on is intimacy and love when it deals with sex. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, and today's guest, Eric Nagler. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Really is, from the HAI, Human Awareness Institute.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
Hi, Eric. So, I'm really curious about this sacred energy exchange.
Right.
What is that? This is something something that's really, really needs to be.
That's a great question, because sacred energy exchange or spiritual energy exchange, what do we mean by sacred? What do we mean by spiritual? What do people mean by energy?
What is an energy exchange?
SEX, sex, what do we mean by that? And so it can mean so many different things to so many different people. But I think the fundamental, when we talk about our spirituality and we talk about what's sacred to us, what connects us, is love.
Love, yeah.
And I think that, and what Hai believes, is that we're all born in love, okay? And then as we grow older and as sex becomes part of our being and a part of our communication, sex becomes really the language of love in an ideal place,
right,
in an ideal world. And that's what a sacred energy exchange is this sexual energy exchange between two people who are experiencing love.
And when you say sacred, how do you make sex sacred, as opposed to just having sex? People are having sex. There's just sex. There's like quickies. Is that sacred? That exchange?
I don't know. I don't think sacred has to do with speed. but I think that for me, sacred has to do with, if I'm actually, our experience right here is sacred. Right. We're having a relationship, we're having a communication, and it belongs to you and to me.
Right.
You know, another person coming in and trying to tell us who we are or tell us how to be, that kind of insults the sacredness of our connection.
Right.
So I think that any connection is sacred.
You work with couples to do these retreats. And get them to reconnect again to their sexuality together.
Yeah.
So explain a little bit how that runs and how that works, and how couples can come back together and get into that sacred, loving feeling when they have sex. Again, how does that work?
So the Human Awareness Institute, HAI, we put on workshops where we give people the opportunity to explore what is sex, what is love, and what is intimacy.
Right.
And we do very, very little of defining what those things are. So there isn't a lot of teaching, and there actually isn't a lot of lecture. It's about experiences. It's about two people coming together and experiencing some part of their relationship, some part of who they are together. And it may be a couple, and it may be with a stranger.
Right.
What is it like when I sit down and tell somebody of a different gender, what is it like to tell that person what my gender is like? What is it like when I sit down with a person of the same gender to tell that person what my gender is like?
Right.
To begin to set up communication lines where we have the opportunity to explore. Because in the workshop, it's a lot of experience.
So this intimacy, when we're learning about intimacy and you're, guiding couples to get intimate, does that necessarily deal with like sex? Like people kind of, I think, have this image of intimacy. Oh, well, it's going to get touchy-feely and stuff. Like intimacy, just explain.
Let me just go a little bit backwards there. When you say we're guiding people to get intimate, or actually earlier you said we're getting couples to be, we're not really doing those things more than we're allowing, because what a lot of letting down and becoming more intimate has to do with just being in a safe place where I can let down some of my guard.
Surrender.
Yeah, where I can surrender, where I can take a risk, And so the first thing that we do in the workshop is create a really, really safe trusting space.
Right.
There may be 30 or 40 people. There's singles, there's couples, there are older and younger, people of all kinds of diverse sexuality. And we have some exercises where we get to look into each other's eyes, every single
Eye
person.
gazing. Really.
Just so that we can start to break down some of those defenses,
Right.
okay? And that's the big part of it. So it's not so much getting people as allowing
Right.
people to start exploring. So we don't really say what intimacy is, although I've got a really good acronym for it, so I'll give it to you in a second.
Yeah.
But it's more about, what does intimacy mean for you? And we might
Right.
ask, for how many people here does intimacy have to do with sexuality?
Some of us want intimacy to lead further, and this is why we want to get to experience more intimacy, because I feel that people think it's going to divert into sex. I'm going to get intimate with this person because I'm going to really get laid tonight, and I'm going to, so I mean, it doesn't have to go past that. Intimate, you can stay intimate and without having sex.
So what if intimacy meant into me you see?
Into me you see.
Intimacy, into me you see.
Ah,
so
interesting.
what am I going to express to you? What am I going to lay out on the table for
Right.
you? What kind of vulnerability am I going to have with you and you have with me? And I personally think that the major language of love is sex. That sex is the language of love. So I think
Yes.
that the more intimate we become, the more it might be that sex becomes that vehicle for our being able to express ourselves to each other.
Right.
And yeah, it's perfectly it's perfectly easy for us to start having intercourse and not even noticing the connection that we're having with each other. But it's much easier to be connected with each other when we're being sexual with each other.
What does it mean to surrender and control? Can we switch that around when we're with our partners, when we're having sex? Is there a time where we...
Can we? Yeah.
Are we supposed to? Should we? There's not just one person that's in charge of that whole sacred energy exchange. There's a lot of it that does happen. Like there's a lot, usually the man is the one that takes control. I see it, I hear it all the time. And women are just vulnerable. How do we switch that where, get women to take control?
Or
Instead of surrendering all the time.
encourage men that it's okay to surrender.
Do men not know how to surrender?
Oh, I think that's a big problem. Yeah, because I think in our society we kind of teach men to be separate from each other.
Right.
We teach men to be strong.
Right.
We're always saying to children, don't cry, and especially to boy children, don't cry. And I think the reason why we do this is just in terms of our evolution. It was the men who would be protecting us. It was the men who would go to war. If you're a man and I'm here and I'm having a really intimate relationship with you, a really intimate conversation with you, and then later on, how am I going to be able to kill you? And that's what society requires of men. So men are just grown up in this place where to be intimate and to be vulnerable is very, very scary. So rather than teaching, it's great to teach women to be in control, and also it's important to create a space where a man can really get in touch with who he is inside. Because I was born as an infant. I was a little boy, and that little boy still lives with me. So how can I stay in connection with that little boy?
Well, how do you get into that surrender place? How can you? A
lot of it is about
balance out.
In the high workshops, there's a whole series of them.
Because there's an energy that's coming. I see it's always been revolved around just the male testosterone energy, the control, and it's really, I think that needs to be lifted off, and men need to get in tune with that. Surrender. That's the feminine side.
Right.
It's a real difficult place to guide men.
Right. So what we find is to be able to create a really safe space where you're not going to be put down for being vulnerable.
Right.
And then to invite two men to get together to express how their masculinity is for each other, and what's going on for you, and what is true for you and what's true for me, to just be able to create a bond on a more vulnerable level than the usual bond.
Yeah. Do you think some of these exercises should be you should be guiding couples before they get married so that they can throw that image out so that when they do raise a family, they have it already intact in their marriage, with the loving sexual, like, to express that in the house so that the children can see that and grow up to not be ashamed. How can you
it's just really hard in this society, isn't it?
Yeah, like shame is a real huge, it's deep, it goes back centuries, to release that shame and go, it's okay to be connected to your loving sexuality.
Yeah. You know what? It's one of the things that you have to start with, actually, is that it's okay to feel that shame and to express that shame. That's really the first step, is to notice who we are and to be able to do that in a safe place. So for a person at a workshop to express that shame, nobody's going to be telling them, don't be ashamed, let go of your shame, do this, do that. It's like, okay, thanks.
We have so much more to talk about. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to the show today. My guest, Eric. Nice to still have you here, honestly.
Thanks.
And so the topic on shame we were talking about, it's really a long process to get rid of that in our being and our mind, how we've been raised.
We're not born with shame.
No.
Okay, so shame is something that we're taught. We're taught that there's something wrong with us, and we take on these stories from our childhood, and we grow up with them. So one of the things that's really neat is to have an opportunity, first of all, to notice what kind of stories are going on in your head. How are they serving you? We talk at High. We talk about these two radio stations that could be going on in our head, and one of them is see love, and the other is see bad word. And sometimes if you just change the radio station, if you're going around saying, I really screwed up, I'm really miserable, there's nothing, and see how that feels. And then what if you just change the station over to, I'm a loving person, I love myself, and I make mistakes, and that's okay.
Yeah, the energy's totally changed when you switch over. Yeah.
And it's a lot about habits as well. It's a lot about neuronal pathways and what gets ingrained in us. And what can we do to start modifying that? What can we do to start changing some of those neuronal pathways? And the way to start when we're looking at shame and when we're looking at guilt, the way to start really is noticing it. Noticing is a huge, important tool. Because you'll say something, I'll say something to you and you go, oh yeah, that's true, and then you'll try to correct it right away. And that means you only took a fraction of a second to notice it.
But why do we feel guilty? Because we feel so good with exploring this whole sexual energy and this, like, why are we not supposed to feel good with that loving feeling of how we feel with another person when we're intimate? Like, why? Where does the guilt come from? It comes from society a lot of the times, but
it comes from our folks. Guilt is anger turned inward. Guilt is, somebody being angry at you and telling you you're wrong, and then guilt is that you're taking it on for yourself.
But when it comes to sex, why do we feel guilty?
Yeah. So
when it's a pleasurable, loving energy.
We can go back into history and see what all of that stuff is about.
Yeah.
But for me as an individual, why do I feel guilty? Why did I feel guilty? Because of the stories I was told. Because my sexuality for me started when I was 5 years old. I remember actually this. I know this will sound really strange, but I'm sitting on the bed and my mother is next to me and my little sister, and she's able to sit up, so I must be about 4. And my mother's reading The Three Little Pigs. And the picture that I'm seeing are these 3 boys without pants on.
Right.
And they've got these little curlicue tails that are, I don't know, kind of in the wrong place, and the mother is telling them what to do. And that was hugely sexual for me. And my mother just totally put that down. My mother totally shamed me around my sexuality.
Right.
And you talk about being sexually abused. For me, that was abuse. And that was a story that I needed to change. I needed actually to go back and find that little boy,
Yep.
for whom sex and love were married together,
Yeah.
you know, and then the love kinds of gets disconnected from it, and it's
How?
replaced by anger.
How did it
How
get
does it get this? Because I'm saying, I'm expressing myself sexually and lovingly, and my parents are saying, no, don't do that. So suddenly, the love and sex aren't there together anymore. So there's something wrong with the sex, and my sexual feelings start becoming frustrated and become associated with anger, and that's how a lot of little boys grow up in the
Right.
society.
Yeah.
So when you ask us how, my belief is we have to start really young. We have to start really young in being able to find ways for just to naturalize.
Right.
Because sex is a natural thing. So how do we just naturalize it in our society?
That's the big question. That's
Yeah.
the huge mission. That it's a difficult place to be, pushing
Yeah.
the great big boulder. Like
But if
this.
we're on that mission, then I think it's great.
Yeah.
It's just it's resisting that mission.
Working together in a really a group, strong group environment with it, like High. What types of people do you have that
come to High?
through your doors there?
You
at
know,
High?
okay, so first of all, in terms of the demographic, it's any age over 18. And
18,
it's-
yeah,
and
that
it's-
young, hey?
Yeah, we get 18-year-olds. Mostly, we'll still start in the 20s, and we have lots of 30s and 40s, and lots of older people as well.
Right.
And it's anybody, I think, it's anybody who is consciously on a path of personal growth. So if there are things that you want to change about who you are, and if there is a way that you want to develop, High provides the kinds of tools that are necessary.
That's a highly evolved person knowing that needs to be change, and they know something's been wrong. Like I know that I've been told lies about all of this since I was young. So I found a path of independence to go to get the information that I need to grow into a loving, intimate human being.
Right.
So I think that it's commendable for an 18-year-old to come into a workshop environment with High, whatever they choose, to explore that, to know that there's more out there, to
Yeah,
anger
maybe.
and the negative sex thing, to get into that loving place, because it's love. It really is.
Maybe it takes a highly evolved person, and
Yeah.
but also for me, I didn't have a choice.
Right.
I was so filled with insecurity and filled with jealousy as a young adult that I just knew I wasn't going to have a meaningful relationship unless I did some exploration around it.
Right.
So I think very often it's the people who need to change the most, who are
Right.
going to be looking for it.
Yeah, I think.
And I think the great thing, just to give a little plug, the great thing about High is that it's about the tools. It's about creating an environment where we can take a risk to change.
Safe.
Yeah, it's about safety. And it's not about some kind of dogma. You need to believe this, you need to believe that, you need to believe the other thing. It's not about chakras, it's not about God, it's not about universe.
Right.
It's just about, here are the tools. If you be in charge of your path of personal growth, we trust you. And here are some tools to do that. In noticing was a big one, and just as you mentioned, safety. You know, how can I create a space where I can be safe and not be contracted?
Right.
You know, in our culture,
We're not safe out there.
that's what our culture says.
It's
You're not
really,
safe
really,
out there.
It's dangerous.
That's
because
right.
there's so much stuff that's just exploiting. It's thrown at us, and it's like, holy,
Yeah.
this is like scary stuff, and we
Yeah.
retreat into, it's not a good place
And
out there.
that's a story that may be true, it may be not true. But the thing is, how can I create safety in my environment and be expansive instead of contracting?
Right.
One of the big things that we do is, just about hugging and just about touch.
Right.
How many times have you ever been hugged by someone where you could feel their need, their neediness, and that they wanted something more,
Yes.
and how scary that becomes? So
It
one
is
of the
scary.
things, yeah.
Yeah, I was all still based on sex. Oh my God, this person is going to do something to me. Yeah, so
And is wanting something
so
for you,
you
and
back
is-
away from hugging and embracing with,
Exactly.
that's
Right.
a long path with me too. But I hug everybody now.
Good.
I'm
So
a
one of
hugger.
one of the tools that we have is about agenda. Is that we give people the experience of being able to hug without an agenda.
Right.
That this is hugging that isn't going to lead anywhere. that this is hugging that's just for the sake of touch. That's just for the sake of human connection.
We learn about hugs. Are there
Yeah.
different types of hugs?
There are different types of
Really?
hugs. Oh yeah, they're
So
great.
that's a good,
if there was enough of a camera, I could show you a
Right,
couple
right.
of them.
So we can sort of distinguish as protection to know. Can you teach that? Do you teach that at High? Or can you show
At High,
people?
we teach a
How to hug?
specific kind of hug.
Oh,
Yeah. First of all, it starts with making eye contact.
Right.
Okay, and it starts with permission. Everything that we do in High revolves around permission and
Yeah,
consent, right?
consent, for sure.
So I might say, "Can I have a hug?" Or I might just go like this, but making sure that I get permission for a hug.
Right.
Then what I want to do is connect my heart with yours, just connect this vulnerable place with
Right.
yours. And so like if one of us is taller than the other, then you can use your knees to come down and just connect your hearts. Maybe take a breath together. And when you separate, when the first person is ready to separate, then the hug is ready to separate. You don't just hold on. And to continue making eye contact and to say thank you, okay?
Why-
And that's how we hug.
Hugs are a real generator for that chemical, that oxytocin, correct? So is there a way that we can hug a certain way to get that really stimulated with couples? Like when couples are hugging, can you, is there, because hugs are, I don't know, when I hug somebody, they just want to keep hugging. So maybe I'm generating too much of that intimate hug. Like there's a hi hug, I haven't seen you for a long time, or there's a hug like, oh my God, this is like my aunt, I don't want to hug her. Like, where is it heart
And it's
to
the
heart?
A-frame hug where all you're touching is your shoulders together and not.
Yeah. So I mean, we have to learn how to hug and touch that way. And
So I'm in a community where if I know that you've been to even a mini workshop, even a 2.5 hour free High mini workshop, I know that you know what I mean when I say, "Can I have a hug?"
really, yeah, sure.
Because we've practiced that. And because you know that when you start to release, then I'm going to release.
It's love. Yeah, I feel, the loving. I've been to one of your workshops,
Oh, you
actually,
have?
with Marty. Yeah,
Right.
And it was an interesting workshop because it
Yeah.
is all based on touch. And the question came up about how many people in this room get enough daily touch, and I was the only one that had my hand up.
Wow.
And that really, it was kind of
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah.
Because this is where the whole loving feeling needs to start. And
Right.
if people aren't getting it, there's still fear and guilt out there. It's really, it's pretty tragic. Yeah.
So for us, for you, and for
Can-
me, I've got a bit of an expanded community where I can feel safe, and also
Yeah.
just to be noticing what's happening with people's hugs. It increases the safety too.
Right.
When I go to hug my mother-in-law. I'm not actually married. We've been together for 25 years,
Right.
but we're not actually married. So she calls me her sin-in-law. Right?
Son-in-law.
And when I go to hug her, she is so frightened. I have no idea how close she's actually going to come to me
Yeah,
before she backs
Yeah,
up.
see-
So that's the kind of hug I give her.
Right. You know
know?
what? We can go in deeper and deeper with this. We don't have a lot of time, but it was really great having you here.
Thank
So
you.
we'll be right back. Thanks for watching the show. It was great having Eric on today as a guest. I hope you learned a lot. If you need to have more questions answered, you can email them directly at sexwithdrzen@rogerstv.com. Join us again next time. We'll see you soon.